I would like to welcome today Becky Sampson. She is the CEO of Only Subpoenas, delivering fast, reliable subpoena services that help family law attorneys streamline their cases with confidence. She is also the host of Divorcing Strong podcast, where she features top experts nationwide to simplify the complexities of divorce and empower informed decisions. Hi, Vicky. Nice to see you here.
Hey, nice to see you too. Thank you so much for having me.
And
As
you know
always.
what? It's scary. Oh my gosh, she's about subpoenas and the court and attorneys. And what exactly is Becky doing here on the summit for divine guidance? So we're going to find out because her story actually is very fascinating. And I would call it a divine setup story because from her experience, I know usually in business, a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times in business, we go through some challenging experience and then we want to help others to do the same. And Becky is no exception about that, right? Because you went through horrendous experience in your life, but out of that, Phoenix emerged. I got chills right now. A Phoenix emerged from ashes and eager and willing to help others, help what you went through so others should not go through the same thing, right? I guess
Exactly.
that's your philosophy at this point.
It was in 2018 that I got married to a guy that was 18 years older than I was. We went to Hawaii on our honeymoon and stayed there for a month. And the very last day that we were there, he ended up getting a job offer or a possibility of a job offer. And I'm thinking, what? Like, we're going to end up moving to Hawaii? Like, who does that? So when we got back, it took us about 7 months for him to get a job in Hawaii. So we moved to Hawaii in our first year of marriage. But then 4 months after I received, or 4 months after I got to Hawaii, he ended up threatening divorce with me. Said that I had no value in his life. Like, he literally said, I'm having a really hard time seeing the value that you bring to my life. And so that was kind of a defining moment for me, at least, because what I did is I said back to him is I said, here's the good news. I know the value that I bring to your life. And because of that, at that time, I had no idea what I was going to step into. But I remember the very first day that I moved to Hawaii, I went into the ocean. Talk about divine guidance. I used to always ask for a word for the day. And the first time I went into the ocean, I said, ocean, basically God, what's my word for today? And it was acceptance. And I thought, acceptance of what? I had no idea that I was going to have to walk this path of going through a divorce with this man, because it was only 4 months later that moment of like, you have no value came into my life. And I was able to stand up to him. And at that point, I was like, okay, God, what do I do now? Do I go back to the mainland? I literally packed my whole life up to come here to support him. Or do I stay here and continue doing the things that I was doing, which was getting a degree in peace building, believe it or not.
So let's clarify. You got, because we want details, right? I want details. So
Yep.
you were standing on the ocean shore at that moment when you were asking divine, or you were just going through the day? How was the process?
No, it was the first time I walked into the ocean, and it was one of the first days that I was with a group called the Mermaids. We all swim in the ocean every day. And I walked out on my own and I just looked out to the ocean and just said, what is the word that you want me to hear today? And the word was acceptance. And in our 12-step program, acceptance of all things is the key to success and to peace.
I agree.
And I just didn't know what that meant at that point. I was like, accepting what? Like, I had no idea what I was about to embark in and what I was going to be called to do in representing myself in my court case. So
looking in hindsight, do you see that was the right guidance, the first step, the first word?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, because you know, in life, a lot of times when we don't know the future, and by the way, that was all before COVID, right?
Mhm.
And that was before the whole shutdown, the whole world shut down. That was that played a big part in everything that I did as well. So accepting of whatever life is going to bring you is such a big key for me, and it helped me go through a lot of um, the trials, you know, to be able to get through the trials that I was going through at the time.
So that was the beginning of that grueling journey that you had to go through. How long have you been married by that time? You said you just got married, you went to Hawaii, and then it took you several. So altogether, with from the day you got married to the day you started divorce or divorce started, how long? Not that long,
So
right?
I got to the island on in April of 2019. I was married in 2018. So April 2019, and then 4 months later he threatened divorce, and then it was April 1st of 2020 is when I served him the papers. But there were so many miracles and divine guidance in that divorce, in
That's what
even
we
just
want to
serving
hear.
him.
That's what we
Yeah.
want to hear.
So here's an amazing story. So here I was, a full-time student, getting my degree in conflict resolution, peace building, and my husband had already told me that he was leaving the island, and we hadn't really talked about divorce because I knew at that point that he was trying to get jurisdiction somewhere else so he wouldn't have to pay me anything. So I had to go and learn about the divorce, get my papers, all while taking 7 full-time classes in college, getting straight A's because I needed the scholarships. And so I went into the court on I believe it was March 4th or March 6th of 2020. And you know, the world was about to shut down. Okay. And I put my papers into the courthouse. And on the 16th, I had a really good friend of mine that kept pushing me. He's like, look, you need to go to the court. You need to go back to the court and get those papers signed because your husband is planning on leaving on April 6th. And I had to serve him before he left. And so on March 16th, I go into the courthouse and I go early in the morning. I must have skipped school that day or something, but I went into the courthouse, gave him the paperwork, or I went in and I said, will you please hurry this up and get this signed because I've got to sign him before, I got to serve him before he leaves the island. And the lady's like, well, have you filled out an ex parte? And I'm like, what's an ex parte? Like, no one told me what an ex parte is.
Wow, right.
And she goes, well, here's the form, fill it out. It just basically means that it expedites your paperwork or else it's going to be here for a few more weeks. And so I filled out the paperwork, and normally I would just drive back to the North Shore. It's about an hour and 15 minutes away. But for some reason, talk about divine intervention. For
Hint, hint.
some reason, exactly. So that was 8 o'clock in the morning. For some reason, I stuck around that town, went shopping, went to Walmart, all this stuff. And I get a call from a friend of mine at 2 o'clock. And he said to me, he says, Becky, are you still around near the courthouse? And I'm like, actually, I am. He's like, you need to go back to the courthouse and you really need to tell them that you're going to be back on Friday to pick up the paperwork because you can't, I mean, you have to demand that you get this signed. You put the ex parte in this morning, but you need to go back. So I went back, sat in the parking lot, called the self-help lady, and she sent me upstairs to the clerk's office. And I explained the situation. I said, look, my husband's supposed to be leaving the island in 3 weeks, and I've got to have these paperworks back. I'll be back on Friday to pick them up. She goes, give me 10 minutes. You can come downstairs and get them. Well, the very
Wow.
next day, they shut the courthouse down for 2 months.
Okay, we need to dissect. This is amazing. We have to talk about it. So let's start from the point where you decided to have a divorce because he threatened you with the divorce, but he didn't go through it, right? What made
He
you?
didn't.
What made you? Was there some kind of interesting outwardly experience? Meaning, what gave you the message? You have to do it now.
Well, so he threatened divorce in August of 2019. Okay. We talked about it. I was hoping that we could figure something out. We could stay together, but it was January. Here's the divining moment in January was when I asked him, I said, look, if you'll stay for another year just to get me through my degree, then that would help. He says, no, I got to go. I got to get back at him and my family because his job provided me free education. And so I was just asking him to stay one more year. But then something told me to check his email. And at that point, that day when he was at work, he doesn't know this, but at work, I checked his email and saw that he had just purchased a ticket off the island. So I knew when he was planning on leaving, even though it took him a month to tell me. So I knew it was over. So then at that point, I had to get to work. I mean,
So
as
were you using your intuition?
well, obviously for me, it was God saying, you need to go check the email, Becky. You need to see what the reality of this situation is.
How did it
Because I
come?
wasn't, huh?
Not how did it come? The guidance, your intuition, you just
The
felt it. You said God told me. How
Yeah,
did
no,
God tell you?
I felt an impression, go check the email.
So you felt it. So
And
it
so,
was your
yeah,
intuition. You needed to do it,
yeah,
right?
yep,
Now we're talking
yep.
about something, right? Intuition. How do you do it? Because
Yeah.
people talk about it. Yeah, I got it, but how? What's
Well,
the
see, the thing is, people, the spirit, God, universe, whatever you want to call it, for me, I call God. God speaks to us all individually. You know, sometimes it's
right?
a warm feeling. Sometimes it's, for me, it was an instant, like, go check the email. I mean, that's
Mhm.
that I'm like, okay. And I've just over the years gotten more and more intuitive, or I've got more sensitive to those messages, and when they come, I take action. And
When they
it was
come, you
something.
trust, right? When you come,
Absolutely.
you have to
Yep.
notice them, and then you have
Yeah.
to trust them, and you have to go and follow your intuition and take actions, right?
Yeah, well,
Mhm.
and it's, again, God can't drive a parked car. So
Mhm.
I truly believe that he gives us messages all the time. And if we're not listening, then he stops giving them to us because he's like, you're not paying attention. So for me, I'm always on a daily basis going, okay, that God, that was you. I know that that was you. You put that person in place. You made that phone call. You gave me the impression to call that person, or to have that conversation, or to have that thought in the middle of the night when I mean, I can't even tell you how many times I was woken up at 3 a.m. with, you need to put this into the court and you need to do it now. And it's not like, oh, okay, I don't even know what that is. Okay, so go research and then go write that paperwork and get it in, like whether it was discovery or whether it was reaching out to a certain attorney, or whether it was, you know, getting one little tidbit from somebody. And then I ended up just going down that rabbit hole until I got the answers that I needed. So to me, I feel like it I one of the things I really regret through my divorce is not paying attention and not writing down every single thing that happened, because there were so many miracles. Because April 1st was by far another miracle, because he was supposed to go out on the 6th of April. So because when you get divorce papers signed by the court, you have 21 days to serve them. Well, this April 6th was too far. It was beyond the 21 days. And here we were staying in the same apartment. So, but the whole world was shutting down. And so the spirit was like, right, you've got to like move on this, move. And it was getting to the point where I finally turned to him and I said, look, if you want to get off this island, you're going to have to get off sooner than the 6th. So we need to change your flight. So that helped me because I could serve him the papers within the time. And I didn't mean for it to happen on April 1st, but we ended up getting him 2 other flights that were canceled, and the third one finally went through. We drove down to the airport, and I had planned on somebody else serving him. And had I not served him at the airport on the way out of the island, I would have not been where I am today. I would not have won my case. I would have not been able to solidify the settlement. None of that would have happened. So you look at pivotal moments in my story, at least I have, and I look at that going, wow. I mean, I'm a sliver of a difference and it would not have turned out the same.
Right.
And so I look back and just go, wow. And it's amazing that I have turned that mess into now a message and to being able to help so many people. I mean, I'll tell you, I had an hour and a half, probably 2-hour conversation with somebody on the way back on a road trip, even last night, that I know that I went through what I went through so I could help her going through what she's going through now, because she's just starting the process of divorce. And had I had somebody like her tell me what I told her last night, it would have saved me a lot of headache and a lot of heartache. So God knows what God's doing, and trusting that process can be sometimes very, very difficult. But for me, I had to
why is it difficult? Why is it difficult?
Because sometimes I think, okay, is that really from him, or is that from me, or should I really do this? Should I really not do this? Is this going to hurt me? Is it not going to hurt me? Even though I have no idea if I get an impression. Here's another one that was really amazing is I was taking some paperwork down in Honolulu to his attorney. And I was, for one of my classes that I was starting, there was a book called Peace. What is it called? I can't remember the book. Anyway, I was supposed to read it for one of my classes, and I was reading it while I was walking down the streets of Honolulu to his office. And it talked about having a heart at war versus a heart at peace. And I thought, oh, I was so mad at his attorney, because his attorney was doing all kinds of stuff and saying all kinds of things about me. And all of a sudden, I just felt this impression that I needed to go buy him some chocolates. So I stopped at one of the convenience stores, bought him a little bag of chocolates. And when I went to go drop off the paperwork at his office and, on his door, I left the box of chocolates, or the bag of chocolates. And I'm telling you, just that little gesture shifted the way that his attorney was towards me. I was representing myself, and he had an attorney. And in the end, 3.5 years later, I'd say, 3.5 years later, his attorney actually, I believe, worked to help me through that process, because he had seen that I was doing the very best that I knew how. And he even complimented me in front of the judge a couple of times, but I think it was because of that impression that I got. Becky, create connection versus disconnection, create peace and not war. And when you're dealing with the divorce,
the law of God, and the law of God is love. And yes, it takes two to war. And the spiritual principle is don't resist. You have to accept, and you have to send blessings, not being aggressive and angry. So you definitely fulfill the law in this case. Congratulations.
Well, it's not easy. It's not easy when somebody's attacking you personally, spiritually, emotionally. And what helped me is that I would go to school every day and learn about these peace building techniques. And I'm like, I would have an email ready to go to the attorney, and it was like, and then I'd be like, oh, I have to rewrite that dang email. And I didn't have ChatGPT back then. ChatGPT rewrite it for me. I had to come from my heart. And I say, anytime that you go to court, the most powerful weapon you have is a soft heart towards that person, towards the judge, towards the other attorney, towards yourself, the grace, because I would never have made it through that. And, it's a lot of work. It's easy to be mad and resentful. I mean, even on Facebook today, I came across someone that was like, he's been so bad to me. How do you get revenge? And please don't tell me to just move on. And I said to her, you're never going to win with that kind of attitude. That's not, you play right into their trap.
Exactly.
And God doesn't support contention. He supports love.
That's right.
And so if you want God to work for you, you got to work for him. And that's changing us. And that was one of the things when I dropped my husband off, my former husband, off at the airport to serve him that day on April 1st. I drove away from that airport, and my prayer to God was, please keep my heart soft towards him. And that
That
was
was the
hard.
best thing you could do, right? It was hard, but that was the best thing you could do, the right thing.
Yeah. So if you have a soft heart, or if I had a soft heart, I could better hear what God wanted me to do.
Exactly. Because
So
if you're angry, messages will not come clear. You have to be in harmony or at peace to receive. But when you're going through turmoil, how can you be in harmony and in peace when you're going through the turmoil? But that's the initiation in love. That's the hard lesson that we have to learn. And that's what the whole spiritual journey is all about: love and acceptance.
well, and I say to people all the time too, and I said this to the lady last night, is I said, it doesn't mean that you don't have all the emotions of the scale, like anger, frustration, resentment, retaliation. You feel all of those feelings. That's part of the grieving process of divorce. And so be patient with yourself. I remember when people were saying, Becky, don't get so mad. And I'm like, let me be mad. I've got a process. And for me, it was going to the ocean. For me, it was giving, I had to have some way of releasing, feeling it, allowing myself to feel it, and then release it. And then God would take it, right? Like he can't take something that you're unwilling to give him. And so, it's okay to stew in that for a period of time and then process it and let it go. And then you go for the next thing, and
Right.
it's been an amazing process.
Because actually what I teach usually, you can divorce on paper, but the
Mm-hmm.
divorce process actually takes very long time, because you have to divorce emotionally, spiritually, mentally. And that's why people fight after the divorce or during the divorce, because they're not letting go. They're resisting, they're hating, they're angry, and that keeps them together. So energetic chain keeps people together, still divorced, still not divorced, still married in a turmoil marriage, because they didn't divorce, because they didn't let go.
Yeah.
And that's
Well, and
something
it's
that
it's a
is
process.
invisible.
It's a
Mhm.
process. And
Okay,
you just have to be patient.
let's go back to, sorry, I keep getting to steering us
That's
back
okay.
to divine guidance. So,
Yeah.
because it's fascinating, the divorce, it's
It's
definitely, we
not
have to
something that
make
everybody wakes up and gets into.
right, wanting to do right. So let's talk about, you told me you ended up on the island without food, without money, without anything, and with divine intervention, you were able to make it. Could you elaborate on that? Tell us about that more.
Yeah, I made the choice to stay on the island. And I was a full-time student. Like I said, I was getting my degree in conflict resolution. Um, and at the same time was having to write up my own discovery requests, my own motions, going to the courts and representing myself in front of his attorney and the judge. So it was a very interesting process, because I learned very early in the process that I just needed to trust that I would get what I needed when I needed it.
Here's
So,
a brilliant point you're making. You needed to trust, because
yes.
you're doing this stuff, especially you're all by yourself, nobody is helping you professionally, so
Mm-mm.
to speak, right, officially,
No.
because you don't have the money to pay, you don't have an attorney, but you had to trust. And how did you exercise that trust? What does it mean to you?
Well, a big part of mine is that, again, being very sensitive, making sure that my side of the street was clean. First of all, I had to be a vessel that I could hear and I could feel.
And how do you make yourself a vessel that you could hear? We already talked about it, but let's
I love
repeat
it.
for
Well,
people to know.
I am someone that talks therapy out. So I was in the ocean all the time. I was in the ocean giving things away all the time. I was in prayer a lot. I was asking for help from my angels, from um, from my friends, my sweet friends in the water that would listen to it on a daily basis. I had to do things, and even when I would go to court, so on that back then, a lot of it was WebEx because of the courts being closed. We weren't allowed to go to the courthouse. So before I would have a hearing, I would go and do a lot of self-care. I'd turn my phone off, not allow anybody to call me so that I could be really in tune with what I say and what I felt. And pray. I sent out prayer requests to a bunch of friends, trying to prepare myself so that I could say the right things at the right moment. I think that every individual person is different that way, whatever it is. But I always say, figure out what gets you into a place of peace. Because when you're feeling peace, you're feeling God, 100%. When you're feeling conflict and you're feeling anxiousness and you're feeling fear, you're feeling the adversary. And you're gonna spin out of control. So peace was like my word that I'm like, okay, am I feeling peace? And it doesn't mean that I felt it all the time. But that was my goal, is to feel that peaceful feeling so that I could be a conduit and receive whatever I needed. So the other thing you brought up is that I didn't have money. And that is look, living in Hawaii is not cheap,
Oh,
And
no, it's not cheap for sure. And
there was
it's
many,
ironic. I was thinking it's ironic how in Hawaii people go there for paradise, right? It's paradise. People are on vacation, and here you are in paradise struggling.
oh, I think I told you before that I want to write a book called Living in Paradise on Pennies. That's really what it was. And interesting. Oh, I wish I could show you. One of the funny things that I just have it over there on my shelf, but I picked up so many pennies when I was in Hawaii. And I knew every single time I picked up a penny, God was like, Becky, I gotcha. I gotcha.
And how did it
And I
make
would
you
thank
feel?
him. Um, I felt supported. I knew that I was in Hawaii for a reason, and I believe that God left me there for 5 years so that I could heal, and also be protected. And I thought I was going to stay there a long time, a long term, and God had other plans. So they all say you make a plan and God will laugh, right? But I'm very grateful for the time that I had there. And I'm grateful for the lessons that I have, or that I learned to trust him, even for, like, I never paid rent late. I had people that supported me, gave me discounted rent. They knew my situation. I never went without my car working. I never went without groceries. And I still, looking back now, I'm like, I have no idea how I did that. At one point, I did have a job that paid me very little. I'd actually started 2 podcasts for them. Should have been paid a lot more than they did, but I was considered a student. And so they paid me student wages. So I just trusted the process. I love that you brought up that, is trust the process. And the process refined me into a person now. It's like, look, you're in faith or you're in fear. And when I'm in fear, I'm not partnered with God.
And when you are angry, you are in fear, because when you're angry at somebody, we could say you were justified to be angry with your husband, but that doesn't stand in a court of God, right? And we're not talking about judgment. I'm just saying play on words, court of law, or court of God. So God, so it doesn't matter. You have to accept. You have to be peaceful. You have to be in harmony. You have to forgive, right? So yes, it's very hard, but your process was move towards step by step, moving towards acceptance, peace, harmony, and love ultimately.
Right. Well, and I do believe, look, it's in the scripture, God gets angry as well. So anger is a God-given emotion. However, what you choose to do with that, whether it's healthy or productive or non-productive, is totally up to you. I mean, are you, to me, I've become a lot more patient with myself of what I feel when I feel it. Do I have to stay there? No, no. But it's a real thing. I want to acknowledge it. And I want to go, okay, what do I need to do in this moment to get back to peace? And usually that means get back in alignment. And get back in alignment means to let go, because there's something I'm trying to control, whether it's the courts or whether it's the attorney or what they say about me or what they think about me
So
or my
let's
performance.
give us an example right now, just any example. You said you mentioned very wonderful process. You said I need to get into alignment. So I know that. So give us the moment where it happened and how you did it.
In I would say, and it's very unusual for people to have as many hearings as I had. I was with my former husband for less than 2 years, and we were in the court for 21 hearings. So every time I had a new hearing come up, I refined my process, right? So I got better and better
It's like
and better at it.
study,
And
study on the go, right? You're studying while going through
yeah,
it.
the first several of them, I got so nervous and I just was like, oh my gosh. But then again, if you go back to what I talked about, I started this process. I started creating this process for myself, which is in the morning, my phone's going off. People know, everybody knew when the hearing was, look, I need you to be praying for me that day. You won't be able to reach me. I'm going to go on walks on the beach. I'm going to go get the water under my toes in the sand. I actually used to print out pictures of all the people that would support me because I was in Hawaii on an island by myself, and I'd put them behind my computer, like on my wall. So when I was in the hearing on the WebEx, I could see all this and feel all this support around me, right? And I could connect with them energetically, even though they weren't there with me in the courthouse. So again, different things work for different people. I do a lot of writing. I do a lot of journaling. I journal until journal until your heart stops bleeding, just because there's a lot of stuff in there, and just let it out. And I also wrote letters to God. This is something I did at one of the retreats I did in Hawaii, is I had everybody write a letter to God, and then, about a minute or two, just had them stay in silence. And then I had them put pen to paper and have God write a letter back to them. That is really powerful, because usually the things that we're worried about that we're giving to God, he ends up writing back going, oh, my sweet little daughter, beautiful daughter of mine. Like, why are you so worried? I got this. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. You're experiencing exactly what you're supposed to be experiencing, because I have a purpose for you. And because I have a purpose for you, I'm preparing you for that through the trials and tribulations. But we can't see that. He can see that. And so it's hearing it and feeling it and embracing it, so that I can go the next mile, the next hard thing. I can go, okay, God's got it, And I always laugh that I'm from heaven and I work for God, but it's taken years for me to see, and still have to remind myself often, that that's where I am. For some reason, I keep forgetting, It's like, what, Becky? And I even had to remind my husband now, when we've been in some court stuff, is, give it to God. Let him do the heavy lifting. It doesn't have to be a court thing for you, but for me, it was all, I've been in the court for 4.5, 5 years with different things. And it can be very heavy, but when you let go and let God, he takes that burden, and then he says, okay, Becky, here's the next step. Here's the next step. This is what you need to do. This is where you need to go. This is how you need to get the money to pay for your rent. This is where you need to go. It was just amazing process, but it takes a lot of patience. And I
And
always
it
say,
takes a
God,
lot of trust. because
Oh,
God will not tell you in your ear in a loud voice. It could,
yeah.
but it's not always happen, right? It doesn't always happen. So you have to be patient, and you have to be trusting, and you have to hear, and you have to feel it. And again, here is very relative term,
Yeah.
because it's sometimes it's just a feeling, like you said, impulse. You have to check that email, you have to get up and do it, you have to stop here, maybe slow down. It's just an impulse, but you have to realize that that's the guidance.
Well, and sometimes kind of one thing I always talk about is that I always felt many times when I was like, oh my gosh, my rent's due in like 3 days. How in the world am I going to pay for it? I felt like I was being dangled off the cliff with a piece of dental floss. And like, this is not going to hold me. Like, this is how, but I have to just remind myself, Becky, step back and watch God's miracle happen.
Right.
And it always did, even if it caused me to reach out to people and say, hey, I need help and assistance. So that doesn't mean that you just sit back and do nothing.
Right.
Okay. Like I had to be proactive. I was constantly looking for jobs. I was constantly, and sometimes I did have to reach out to family members and be like, look, I need support. I was able to pay them all back, you know what I mean? Luckily, through all the stuff. But it was tough. It was tough, but it built my spiritual muscle to the point where now I feel, okay, God, look, I'll do what you want me to do. I'll go where you want me to go. I'll say what you want me to say. Because I trust that you're way stronger, more intelligent, more powerful being than I am.
Right.
And that's where I really get in trouble, is when I kind of take the wheel back and I'm like, I can't do this, but
Well, I
yeah,
usually say, for when a difficult situation arises, I usually say, God, this is not my battle, it's your battle. So
yeah,
you do for you make it right for everybody, for the highest good of all involved, because I
mhm,
also pray for the other side, for their highest good, because God does not take persons. God is not, I've read it somewhere a long time ago, God is not no respecter of persons. It's a interesting
yeah,
language here, but really God is not, because God is unconditional love. You either follow the path of love, or you follow the path of anger and aggression. So what is it that you choose?
100%. And that's what I
Mhm.
said to this lady last night that's just starting the process of divorce. Is I said to her, your greatest weapon is your heart.
Right.
And it's not to hurt the other person, but to love them. And you can
That's right.
still love someone with boundaries. And so the very last day when we went for trial, in my court case, which was in October 2022, I think it was, or no, sorry, June of 2022. And I walked into that courthouse with a prayer in my heart, sitting in the courthouse next to him on the other side of the room. And I just said, I love you. I forgive you. The whole pono, right? I felt sorry for him, to be honest with you. And I know that that was a tough day for him, and to still see him as a person and not an object that's out to hurt me, which he did, and he made every attempt. But that was the most powerful thing I could have ever done. And it was because of who I had allowed myself to become through the process of trusting God.
A round
Yeah.
of applause.
And it's still work. It's work that's worth it.
And it froze.
Yeah. Yeah. And I said to this lady last night, I said, I know it may seem a little off. And the interesting thing is, in my first divorce, that was my second divorce, and I'm happily married on my third and never divorce again. Like, he is amazing. But my first divorce, my former husband and I actually came together 3 years after our divorce and did a 90-minute podcast about forgiveness. And we had a lot of physical and emotional abuse in our relationship. And it was beautiful to be able to sit in the same room with him and cry together. and to be able to, I am going to actually be releasing that audio at some point. But it's, you don't have to become a bitter person through these things. And that's the beauty and the gift of aligning yourself with God's voice, his purpose, and his plan, really.
And being able to hear the voice or perceive the voice or through the feeling, through the intuition, and know that divine guidance is always with you, surrounds you, and gives you the guidance every single, basically even minute of the day, if you're willing to see it.
So you just said the magic word. You know, even when I lost weight, people would come to me and say, Becky, what is the magic pill? And I swear to you, the thing that I have discovered the most in life is its willingness. You're willing to do the work. You're willing to listen. You're willing to take action. You're
And
willing
you're
to soften
willing to
your heart.
forgive.
You're
And if
willing
you're
to forgive.
willing to forgive.
Yeah. It, or not. And you're totally 100% a choice.
Right.
So, however, if you're willing to let go, you're willing to trust, you're willing to listen, you're willing to take action, proper action, healthy action, get people around you that support you in a healthy way. Don't go after them. You know, that's not healthy. You will become an amazing person that God has always seen you from the very beginning. But you have to be willing to be molded in that way.
That's right. So we will finish this right now. 444. I'm looking at the timer and it says 444, which is usually angels are around us supporting.
Yes.
I know that for sure. So I am sure we have two major words here that we're finishing our interview, but two major words: acceptance and being willing to accept, right? Or willing to follow divine. Thank you so much, Becky. It's it's interesting. Again, paradox. You're talking about courts and subpoenas, and yet you're also talking about forgiveness. Two mutually not accepting terms, but
Polarized.
polarized. But well, this is doing business the woman way, and that's what I believe in: the doing business the woman way. Acceptance, forgiveness, flow, ease, divine guidance, connection, right?
Well, you've got the masculine, which is the subpoenas, I'm going to go get them and get them. And then you've got the feminine side, which is the justice versus the mercy. Because us women as feminine energy, we have mercy to give to the world. That doesn't mean we're doormats and all that stuff.
Exactly.
It just means we can change the world with one heart at a time.
Right.
And
with
so,
mercy and grace.
Yes, exactly.
With mercy and grace.
Yep.
100%. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you so much. And tell us how our audience can find you if, well, God forbid, they need subpoenas, right? If they are in the process, but you never know.
Can I just give you the divine story real quick of how I even came across the subpoenas story?
Sure,
and the reason why I
yes.
do
Oh,
it?
that's true, actually. That's good. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Here's the last story I'll share with you is that it was only about a month and a half ago. Because I subpoenaed my former husband 21 times, and my husband now was left with 21 cents, and I went through 21 hearings. That's why my free download is the 21 checkpoint, right? To the things that you need to know before you go through. But the only subpoenas was about 6 weeks ago. My husband said to me, he says, Becky, people going through divorce need to have all the information, and they don't typically have the information. There's usually one person that's holding the information back. And he's like, you are so good at finding the information that they need. And I'm not about taking people for, don't clean their clocks. That's not my thing. But you need all the information in order to make an educated decision. And we were going through a divorce. We were going through a court case for his granddaughter. And we had asked our attorney to do a subpoena, and he didn't want to do it because they're a little cumbersome. And finally, through a lot of pressure, he goes, fine, I'll do it, but it's $500. And I was like, $500 for a subpoena? Like, I've done 21 of them. Like, I know exactly the process. But he's like, fine, I'll do it. Well, I got off the phone, called the bank, found out how they wanted to be served, called the attorney back. By the time I called them back, the paralegal said, Becky, we've already sent it off and it was declined. And I said, declined? Like, did you do this, this, and this? And she goes, no, how do you know that? I said, well, I called and found out exactly how they want to be served because I've done this a million times. And so she went ahead and resubmitted it the way that I told her to, and it went right through. And my
And you
husband
had to
said to
pay
me,
$500 for that?
no. So I was doing the back end work trying to say, okay, look, let me do the work for it so you don't charge me as much. So no, he didn't charge me that much. But my husband's like, Becky, you're so good at this. Like, and we were talking about it just last night. I'm like, on the way home, he must have like for an hour and a half, he's like, you've got to do this business. You've got to help people. Cause he was left with 21 cents in his bank account when his wife left. So it doesn't just happen to women. It happens to men as well. And it was like, ding. And ever since then, we've been in the flow of getting this only subpoenas. Now I can only do subpoenas for attorneys because I'm not an attorney. And so the lady I talked to last night is about to hire an attorney. So I said, that's fine. If you hire an attorney and you want to use my services, you can do that. But it has to go through an attorney and they have to have me do all of their subpoenas works. So yeah, that was another really big defining moment for our business is my husband being able to see what I do and what lights me up and sometimes we don't see it ourselves, but the people around us do. And he's like, you've got to do this. Like, you have to do this. There's people out there that need your help and you
What
love to do
divine
it.
guidance came through? What divine guidance came through your husband and made him see it
Exactly.
so he can convey it to you because you needed to hear it and he was able to communicate.
Exactly. We were talking last night. I'm like, I'm not even sure the defining moment, like, but he just started on the way home. And then immediately by the time we got home, I had already called two of my attorney friends and a paralegal, and they're like, Becky, this is a fantastic idea. I'm like, okay, so that's it. Now we're full blown. So you asked kind of how people could find me. I actually on TikTok am Divorcing Strong. I'm on YouTube, Divorcing Strong. Instagram, Divorcing Strong, and on Facebook, Becky Sampson. So,
Perfect.
yeah. So,
Thank
yeah,
you so much, Becky. Thank
you
you.
are welcome.
I'm so happy that that's difficult experience turned into a beautiful business that you can help others and also not just by subpoenas, but I'm sure you'll be talking to people, you will be helping people from your heart, not just because and just doing subpoenas, right?
Yeah,
So
come from your heart
right,
and God rewards. He rewards effort 100%.
right, right.
So, thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.